I am Ariana Cole, and I am 28 years old. The night my life shattered, the rain fell like it had something to prove. It wasn't the gentle kind that whispered against windows or washed the streets clean. This rain came down angry, heavy sheets crashing into cracked sidewalks, turning dirt into mud and silence into something dangerous. Thunder rolled across the west side of Baltimore like a warning no one could stop, and lightning split the sky so close it rattled the windows of the small brick house on Linden Court. Inside that house, I stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, staring at a pot of rice burned black at the bottom. The smell filled the room, sharp, bitter, unforgiving. My hands trembled at my sides. My feet were swollen. My back screamed with every breath I took. I was 8 months pregnant, and my belly pushed tightly against the thin maternity dress I'd worn too many times already because it was the only one that still fit. Before this story goes any further, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Your support helps stories like this reach people who need hope in moments when everything feels lost. I remember thinking, this is it. I didn't know exactly how yet, but something inside me whispered that this moment would divide my life into 2 parts, before tonight and everything that came after. Victor sat at the kitchen table, his shoulders slumped forward, still wearing his work clothes even though it was nearly 9 at night. A half-empty bottle of bourbon rested beside his phone. His eyes were red, glossy, and unfocused in a way that made my stomach tighten. He'd been drinking more lately. A lot more. Ever since I noticed he stopped talking about his job. Ever since the small lies started stacking up between us like bricks. I asked you to do one thing, Victor said quietly. His voice was calm, but I knew better. That calm was the kind that cut deeper than shouting. The kind that came right before something broke. One thing, Ariana, he continued. Cook dinner. That's all you had to do today. I swallowed hard. My throat felt tight, dry, like the words were stuck behind a wall. I tried, I said softly. I really did. My back was hurting so bad today, and the doctor said I need more rest. He said stress isn't good for the baby. His hand slammed onto the table, so hard the bottle jumped. The baby, the baby, the baby, he snapped. Everything is about this baby. What about me? What about the fact that I work all day while you sit around doing nothing? Nothing. The word hit me harder than his hand ever could have. I wanted to remind him of the 2 cleaning jobs I worked until just last month. How I scrubbed office floors on my knees until my ankles swelled. How I cleaned toilets while morning sickness burned my throat. How I saved every dollar for the baby while he complained about being tired. But I didn't. I'd learned that arguing with Victor when he was like this only made things worse. What happened next unfolded so fast my mind couldn't keep up. Victor stood abruptly, shoved his chair back, and walked down the hallway toward the bedroom. Panic crawled up my spine as I followed him. Victor, what are you doing? I asked. He didn't answer. He yanked open the closet and started pulling my clothes off the hangers, dresses, sweaters, shoes, throwing them into his arms without care. He marched back toward the front door and flung everything outside into the rain. My shoes hit the porch first. Then my bag. Then the small plastic container that held my prenatal vitamins. Then the shoebox. I watched in horror as the box burst open on the lawn, ultrasound pictures spilling into muddy water. No, please, I cried, rushing toward him. Please don't do this. Porch lights flicked on one by one. Curtains shifted. Neighbors began to watch. Please, I begged, grabbing his arm. Think about the baby. Just let me stay tonight. I'll figure something out tomorrow. I promise. He shoved me away so hard I stumbled backward. Instinct took over. I wrapped my arms around my stomach, barely catching myself before falling. Then he leaned in close enough for me to smell the alcohol on his breath and said the words that would destroy him forever. You're nothing, he said slowly. You hear me? You came from nothing. You are nothing. And you're going to die as nothing. Across the street, Mrs. Patterson shouted my name, telling me to come over, telling me I didn't have to stay there. But I couldn't move. My legs felt heavy, useless, like they didn't belong to me anymore. I stepped into the rain like someone already drowning. I sank to my knees in the mud, sobbing as water soaked my clothes, my hair, my skin. My hands shook as I gathered my ruined belongings, rain mixing with tears until I couldn't tell which was which. Behind me, Victor slammed the door. Locked it. Inside my belly, my baby kicked hard, as if asking what was happening. As if asking why everything suddenly felt unsafe. That was when my phone buzzed in my pocket. The screen was cracked but still working. Unknown number. I'm here. I've been watching. My heart skipped. Before I could respond, I heard it. The engine. Deep. Smooth. Powerful. Headlights cut through the rain, bright and unmistakable. A car so expensive it didn't belong on a street like this. A midnight black Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up to the curb. The entire neighborhood went silent. The back door opened. A man stepped out, tall, composed, dark skin glowing even under the storm lights. His suit looked like it cost more than everything Victor owned combined. Caleb Rowan. My uncle. The man I had run from 3 years earlier. He walked toward me without hesitation, letting his shoes sink into the mud, letting rain soak his suit. He didn't look at the neighbors. He didn't look at the house. He only looked at me. Ari, he said gently. I've been looking for you. Inside the house, the front door creaked open. Victor stepped onto the porch, confusion draining from his face as panic took its place. What the hell is going on? He demanded. Who are you? Caleb ignored him. He knelt beside me in the mud, wrapped me in his arms, and whispered the words I didn't know I needed to hear. You're safe now. And for the first time in years, I believed it. I sat in the back seat of the Rolls-Royce, wrapped in a thick cashmere blanket that smelled faintly of clean linen and something expensive I couldn't name. Rain drummed softly against the tinted windows, but inside the car it was quiet. Too quiet, like the world had been muted. Caleb sat beside me, his posture calm but alert, one hand resting lightly over mine as if afraid I might disappear again if he let go. Across from us, the driver kept his eyes on the road, navigating through puddles and narrow streets with practiced ease. Behind us, the small brick house on Linden Court faded into darkness. Victor was still standing on that porch when we pulled away. Small. Frozen. Powerless. For 3 years, that house had felt like a cage. A place where my voice grew quieter, my world smaller, my confidence thinner. I'd believed that was all I deserved. Sitting in that car, watching it disappear, I realized how wrong I'd been. How did you find me? I finally asked, my voice barely louder than the rain. Caleb exhaled slowly. I never stopped looking, he said. Not for a day. He explained that after I ran from him 3 years ago, he hired investigators. Quiet ones. Patient ones. People who understood that finding someone who didn't want to be found took time. 6 months earlier, one of them had discovered a marriage license. My name. Victor's name. A new address. I wanted to reach out immediately, Caleb admitted. But my security chief advised caution. We needed to know you were safe. Happy. My throat tightened. So you were watching? I asked. Yes, he said simply. From a distance. And when it became clear you weren't safe anymore, I came. As if summoned by his words, another vehicle appeared in the rearview mirror, a black Mercedes SUV. It followed us at a respectful distance, never too close, never too far. Security. I leaned back against the seat, exhaustion finally sinking into my bones. My body ached. My mind raced. And beneath it all, fear lingered. Fear of what Victor would do next, fear of what he'd already done behind my back. We arrived at Caleb's home in Harbor Ridge just before midnight. Calling it a house felt wrong. It was an estate. Tall iron gates opened silently as we approached. A long, curved driveway led up to a 3-story stone mansion glowing warmly against the rain. Soft lights illuminated manicured gardens and tall windows that looked out over the city skyline. I felt like I'd stepped into someone else's life. Inside, marble floors reflected the chandelier light. The air smelled clean and warm. Not cold or sterile, but lived in. Family photos lined the walls, holidays, graduations, weddings. And there, on the mantel, was a silver-framed photograph. A woman with my face. Younger. Smiling. Holding a newborn baby. That's your mother, Caleb said softly. And that's you. My chest tightened. I reached out with shaking fingers, touching the frame like it might disappear. I didn't know she looked like me, I whispered. You have her smile, he said. And her strength. I was shown to a guest suite that was bigger than the entire house I'd shared with Victor. A bedroom with tall windows, a sitting area, a fireplace, and a bathroom with a deep soaking tub that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally let myself cry. Not quiet tears. Deep, shaking sobs that came from years of swallowing pain. A knock came softly at the door. Dr. Hayes is here, Caleb said gently. Dr. Leonard Hayes was calm, kind, and thorough. He checked my blood pressure, listened to the baby's heartbeat, asked careful questions. The baby is strong, he said. But you're under severe stress. That's not something we can ignore. He looked at me seriously. This wasn't the first time your husband hurt you, was it? I shook my head. He never hit me, I whispered. Dr. Hayes nodded. Abuse isn't always physical, he said. And emotional abuse leaves scars people can't see. While I rested, Caleb's security team returned to Linden Court to retrieve what was left of my belongings. They found more than clothes. They found bank statements. Credit cards in my name I didn't know existed. Accounts that had been drained. When Caleb sat beside me later that night, his expression was gentle but grave. Victor has been stealing from you for at least 2 years, he said. So far, we've traced approximately $84,000. The number hit me like a blow. That can't be right, I whispered. We were saving that money. He showed me statements. He said we were building a future. The statements were real, Caleb said. But the withdrawals were too. Forged signatures. Cash advances. Purchases you never made. My stomach twisted. Every extra shift. Every dollar I saved for my baby. Gone. There were more discoveries. Dating profiles. Photos of Victor with other women. Hotel charges dated during my pregnancy. He'd been living a double life while convincing me I was the problem. I want to press charges, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Caleb nodded. We will. While I slept in a bed that didn't feel like a trap for the first time in years, Victor sat alone in the dark, watching his life collapse in real time. The videos from that night had gone viral. Neighbors recorded everything. Him screaming, me kneeling in the rain, the Rolls-Royce pulling up. By morning, his phone was exploding. His mother crying. His brother calling him a disgrace. Friends distancing themselves. By Monday, he tried to go to work. Security met him at the door. You resigned 4 months ago, his manager said coldly. You've been trespassing. That lie collapsed too. Victor hadn't had a job in months. The money he stole from me was gone, spent on gambling, alcohol, women, and debts he couldn't pay. Within days, he was facing eviction. Within weeks, he was served with papers. Fraud. Identity theft. Domestic abuse. A restraining order. 3 weeks later, I sat in the office of Bernard Ellis, a sharp-eyed attorney with decades of experience. They're going to try to paint you as a gold digger, he said calmly. They'll say you hid your family to trap him. I shook my head. I didn't even know I was pregnant when I ran from my uncle. Bernard smiled slightly. And we have proof. The night before trial, Caleb's family gathered for dinner. Aunts. Cousins. His wife, Marissa. My grandmother, Evelyn's mother, who cried when she held my hands. I thought I'd lost you forever, she whispered. That night, I made a decision. If I survived this, I would help other women escape what I almost didn't. The courtroom was packed. Cameras everywhere. Victor looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner. Broken. When he looked at me, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. And I knew, no matter what happened next, I would never go back. I didn't sleep the night before the trial. I lay awake in the guest suite, listening to the quiet hum of a house built to protect its people, one hand resting on my swollen belly as my daughter shifted inside me. Every movement reminded me that no matter what happened in that courtroom, I had already won something Victor could never touch. My future. My child. My freedom. Caleb was awake too. I knew because the lights in his study were still on when I passed by just before dawn. He was seated at his desk, reviewing documents, glasses perched low on his nose, jaw tight with focus. When he noticed me, he stood immediately. You should be resting, he said gently. I will, I replied. After today. He nodded. Today doesn't define you. It only exposes him. That distinction mattered more than he knew. The courthouse in downtown Baltimore was already crowded when we arrived. Reporters lined the steps, cameras flashing, voices shouting questions that blended into noise. I kept my eyes forward, flanked by Caleb and Bernard Ellis, my attorney. The weight of public attention felt heavy, but it didn't crush me. Not anymore. Inside the courtroom, everything smelled like old wood and authority. Victor sat at the defense table, hunched in an ill-fitting gray suit, his public defender whispering urgently beside him. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically weaker, just stripped of the false power he'd worn like armor. When his eyes met mine, something flickered. Regret. Fear. Shame. I looked away. Judge Miriam Holloway entered the room with a presence that silenced everything. A black woman in her early 60s, silver hair pulled back neatly, eyes sharp and unimpressed by nonsense. She had the look of someone who'd seen every excuse imaginable and stopped believing them decades ago. Bernard's opening statement was calm, precise, devastating. "This case is about control," he said. "About a man who systematically isolated his wife, emotionally abused her, and stole her identity to fund his lifestyle. When she became inconvenient, pregnant, vulnerable, dependent, he discarded her." Victor's attorney attempted to frame the situation as marital conflict. Judge Holloway's raised eyebrow ended that argument before it could breathe. The witnesses came one by one. Mrs. Patterson testified first, her voice firm and unwavering as she described years of yelling, insults, and intimidation. "I watched him break her down," she said, "piece by piece. And that night in the rain, that wasn't a fight. That was cruelty." Financial experts followed, walking the jury through falsified signatures, drained accounts, unauthorized credit cards. The numbers spoke louder than emotion ever could. $84,000 stolen. Hotel charges. Jewelry purchases. Cash withdrawals. All in my name. All without my consent. Then it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand slowly, deliberately, one hand braced against my belly. The oath felt heavier than expected. When I sat, Bernard's voice guided me through the years I'd tried to forget. "How did your marriage begin?" he asked. "I thought I was safe," I said honestly. Victor felt normal. Predictable. I thought that meant kind. And over time, my world got smaller. My voice got quieter. Everything was my fault. The courtroom was silent. Bernard asked about the night Victor threw me out. I described the burnt rice, the whiskey, the words. When I repeated what Victor had said, that I was nothing, I felt the same tightness in my chest I'd felt that night. Bernard let the silence stretch before asking quietly, "Do you believe that now?" I lifted my head. "No," I said. "I don't." Victor's attorney tried to rattle me during cross-examination. "Why didn't you tell your husband about your wealthy uncle?" he demanded. "Because I was ashamed," I replied calmly. "I ran from my family before I ever met Victor. My silence had nothing to do with manipulation. It had everything to do with fear." Then came the evidence that shattered what little defense Victor had left. Caleb's head of security, Dana Whitmore, a former federal investigator, testified with methodical precision. She laid out the documentation of Victor's termination from work 4 months before the incident. The surveillance footage. The dating profiles. "He listed himself as single," Dana said, pulling up screenshots. "No spouse. No child. Some messages were dated during my pregnancy." The courtroom shifted uncomfortably. The footage from Linden Court played last. Victor throwing my belongings. Victor screaming. Me in the mud. Several jurors looked away. Judge Holloway did not. The trial lasted 3 days. The jury deliberated less than 2 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood tall. "We find in favor of the plaintiff on all counts." I felt Caleb's hand tighten around mine. "Full restitution of $84,000 plus interest," she continued, "and $260,000 in damages for emotional distress." Victor's head dropped. Judge Holloway's voice was firm. "Mr. Hale, you have demonstrated a pattern of abuse and fraud that this court will not tolerate. You are ordered to pay the judgment within 90 days. A permanent restraining order is granted. You will have no contact with Ms. Cole." When Victor's attorney tried to raise parental rights, the judge shut him down instantly. "Pending criminal proceedings, your parental rights are terminated. You will not be listed on the birth certificate. You will have no custody, no visitation, no contact." It was over. 5 days later, I went into labor at 3 in the morning. Caleb was there within minutes, steady and calm as we drove through quiet streets toward the hospital. Marissa arrived soon after, holding my hand through contractions, speaking softly when the pain became overwhelming. 14 hours later, my daughter was born. 7 pounds. Perfect. "What's her name?" the nurse asked. I looked at her tiny face, at the future she represented. "Evelyn," I said. "Evelyn Grace Cole." Caleb cried when he held her. "She has her mother's eyes," he whispered. Victor tried to contact me once. Just 2 words. "I'm sorry." I deleted the message without replying. Some apologies arrived too late. 6 months later, the Rowan Grace Center opened its doors in West Baltimore. A shelter, a legal clinic, counseling rooms, job training, a place for women who had nowhere else to go. Standing at the ribbon-cutting ceremony with Evelyn on my hip, I looked out at the crowd and saw pieces of my past reflected in their faces. Fear, hope, exhaustion, resilience. I built this because I know what it feels like to believe you're nothing, I said into the microphone. But you are not nothing. You never were. The applause felt like thunder. That evening, in the quiet of my new home, I watched rain fall softly outside the window while my daughter slept peacefully nearby. Rain didn't scare me anymore. Rain had brought my uncle back to me. Rain had washed away a life built on lies. Rain had given me a beginning. Victor once told me I was nothing. But nothing doesn't survive. Nothing doesn't fight. Nothing doesn't build a future out of pain. I was everything. I always had been. And if this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from, because someone out there needs to hear that their worth is not defined by how others treat them. And your engagement helps stories like this reach the people who need them most.